about the golden-haired maiden. Somewhere in the kingdom, a powerful and domineering king ruled. Once an old herbalist brought him a rare snake in a basket and promised him that if he eats the snake, he will understand the language of animals. The king liked to know what no one else could do, and he called his cook George and ordered the snake for lunch, but he strictly ordered him not to take the fish on his tongue, that he guaranteed it with his life. It was strange to George, after all, what kind of cook would he be who wouldn't taste what he was cooking? And so he ate a piece of roast. At that moment, he heard flies buzzing around him flying around the kitchen. Something for us too. Something for us too. And from outside. Where to go then? And thinner voices answer him. To the miller's barley, to the miller's barley. Giek looks out the window and sees a gander, with a flock of geese. What a fish it is! George understood and quickly ate another piece of roast and, as if nothing had happened, took the lunch before the king. But the king was suspicious and wanted to test George if he had really tasted the snake and ordered him to saddle his horse after lunch and went for a ride with it. The king rode in front and Johannes behind him. As they rode through the green meadow, George's horse leaped and neighed. "Brother, I'm so light that I could jump over the mountains." "What about?" says the other horse. "I'd jump too, but there's an old king sitting on me. When I jump, he falls to the ground and breaks his neck." "Let it fall down," says George's horse. "Instead of the old you will wear a young one." George laughed quietly, but the king saw him anyway and asked, "What are you laughing at?" "To nothing, Lord King," answered George. But the king already knew better. When they arrived at the castle, the old king ordered George to pour him a glass of wine. "But your life depends on whether you don't pour wine or spill it." George took a pot of wine when two birds flew to the windowsill. They were fighting over a long golden hair. "Give it to me, it's mine." "I won't give it a lift." But I saw where he fell when the golden-haired lady was combing her hair. And they started to fight each other and the golden hair fell to the ground until it rang. At that moment Johannes looked back and poured the wine. "That will cost you your life," the king shouted angrily. "But I'll forgive you if you bring me the golden-haired lady and I'll take her as my wife." What was George supposed to do? He saddled his horse and rode out into the unknown in search of the golden-haired beauty. He reached the Black Forest. A bush was burning near the forest, which was set on fire by herdsmen. Sparks flew up the ant hill and the ants ran with their white eggs and called for help. George did not hesitate and put out the bush. "Call us when you need it, we'll help you too," thanked George the happy ants. George rode on through the dark forest until he came to a tall fir tree. On it, high in the branches, there was a raven's nest and below two chicks that had fallen out of the nest. She squealed and begged George to carry them back. He did not hesitate to help them. "When you need us, call us and we will be happy to help you too," the little birds called after him. George rode through the forest again for a long time before he saw a wide sea far away in front of him. And on the shore, two fishermen were arguing about their catch. They caught a big goldfish in a net, and everyone wanted to have it for themselves. "Mine is the net, so is the fish," screams one. And the other says, "Mine is the boat, so is the fish." "I will judge you," said George. "I'll pay you well for the fish. Sell it to me." And he gave them all the money he had received from the king for the journey. He kept nothing. The fishermen were happy to make a good deal and sold the fish to him. Without hesitation, he threw her back into the water. The golden fish has emerged from the waves for the last time and calls to Dirk. "Thank you for saving my life. If you ever need my help, remember me." And it was gone. "Where are you going?" the fisherman asked George. And he told them his whole story, and that he was going to his king for the golden-haired lady. "But we know it well. She is the youngest daughter of our Lord King from the crystal castle over there on the island. Every morning at dawn she combs her long golden hair. The radiance from them goes through the sky and the sea. You have never seen such beauty." "Then I will give you my horse for a boat," said George. "Agreed." The fisherman nodded. "But beware, George. The king has 12 daughters. But only one of them has golden hair." When George was on the island, he went straight to the king to ask him for his golden-haired daughter for his king's wife. The king agreed. "I will give my daughter to your king as a wife, but you must earn her from me. For 3 days you shall do one work which I shall entrust thee with, and when you have done it, you may take the princess with you. Now rest after the journey. Tomorrow I'll give you the first task." The next morning the king said, "My dear daughter wore a necklace of pearls. However, the cord broke and the pearls spilled into the tall grass in the meadow behind the castle. You have to pick up all those pearls. Neither of them must be missing." George went to the meadow. It was so wide that he couldn't even see the end. He knelt down in the grass and searched in vain for pearls from morning to noon. He didn't find a single one. "If only my aunts were here. They would certainly help me. They would certainly help me." George sighed. "After all, we're here to help you." And where they came from, they got married. Suddenly, ants were swarming around George, each carrying a pearl on his back. He strung them on a lace, and when the king counted them in the evening, not one of them was missing. "Okay, George. Go and rest. Tomorrow I will give you another task." And the next morning the king told him, "My golden-haired daughter was bathing in the sea and lost her gold ring. You have to find it and bring it to me by the evening." Johannes went to the sea and walked sadly along the shore. The sea was so deep that you couldn't see the bottom, let alone look for a tiny ring in the sea. "If my fish were here, it would certainly know what to do." Suddenly, something flashed on the surface and a large fish with a gold ring in its mouth emerged from the deep water. In the evening the king praised George again, and on the third day he gave him one last task. "If you want me to give my Goldilocks to your king as a wife, you must bring her dead and living water. He will need it." George did not know where to look for the dead and living water. He walked like this for a long time until he came to the Black Forest. "Oh, if my ravens were here, they would surely know what to do." Then something rustled over his head, and where they came from, 2 ravens came. "We're here to help you, George. What do you need?" "I don't know where to look for dead and living water." "We know about it very well. Just wait a moment and we'll bring it to you." And so it happened. After a while, the ravens brought 2 gourds full of water. In black, the water was dead, and in white, the water was alive. George was glad that he had completed the task and hurried back through the Black Forest to the king. Suddenly, they see a large spider web in the middle of the road and a spider in it, which sucks a caught fly. He sprayed some dead water on the spider and it fell to the ground like a ripe cherry. He was dead. Then he scooped up some of the living water and sprayed it on the fly. The fly began to thrash and scrambled out of the web and blew into the air. "Your luck, George, that you have resurrected me. Without me, you would hardly guess which of the 12 princesses is Goldilocks." She buzzed in George's ear and was gone. The king saw that Johannes had fulfilled the 3rd task, and said that he would give him his golden-haired daughter, but that he had to choose her himself. If he guesses it, he can take it to his king, but if he doesn't guess, he has to go without it. Then he led him into the great hall, where 12 beautiful princesses were already waiting at a round table, but each had a floor-length veil over her hair, so that it was impossible to tell what her hair was. George was unhappy. He didn't know which of the girls to choose. Suddenly, a fly buzzes in his ear. "Walk around the table. I'll tell you which one it is." "It's not this virgin." "Neither does she." "Neither does she." "This is Goldilocks. Give me this daughter. I earned it for my king." "You guessed it." The king smiled. The girl took off her veil and a golden glow flooded the entire hall. The king sent his daughter on a journey as befits a princess, and George accompanied her to his king. The old king jumped for joy at having such a beautiful bride and immediately began to prepare the wedding. "And you, George, I wanted to have hanged, but for serving me so well I will give you just cut off your head and I'll have you buried honorably." Goldilocks was horrified at such cruelty and begged the king to have mercy on George. But all the pleas were in vain. George was executed. So Goldilocks thought that he should give her George's body as a wedding gift, that she would bury it herself. The king could not deny this to his future wife. But such a wish was strange to him. So he secretly followed Goldilocks to the chapel where George's body lay. And he saw Goldilocks sprinkle dead water on George and his head and body again. Then she took the living water and a few drops were enough for George to get up again as if he had been born again. And he seemed to be even stronger and more beautiful than he had been before. "I slept for a long time," said George. "Very long." Goldilocks smiled at him. "And if it weren't for me, you'd be sleeping forever." The two young people ran out of the chapel. The bad old king who was watching them from a distance, but he was furious. He also wanted to be younger and more beautiful. So he picked up a black gourd and poured the rest of the dead water on his head. And the king fell to the ground. But there was no one to revive him. And so the old king died. And because there can be no kingdom without a ruler, and they didn't have anyone as noble as George, and it's always useful if someone understands the language of animals, they made him king and Goldilocks queen. So good triumphed over evil again. Have a nice good night, kittens, sweet dreams. Paw and kiss sent by the cat grandmother.